Hello, my name is Brian Madison. I'm an MSW student at Morgan State University with a specialized practice in urban youth and families. And today we're going to be talking about anxiety. So, what is anxiety? In the DSM-5, anxiety is not defined as a single disorder, but as a core feature present across a group of related disorders known as anxiety disorders. However, the DSM-5 generally describes anxiety as the anticipation of future threat, distinguishing it from fear, which is defined as the emotional response to an imminent threat. Key points from the DSM-5 are that anxiety is the response to anticipated future danger or threat, often associated with muscle tension, vigilance, and cautious or avoidant behaviors. Anxiety can be adaptive in mild forms, but becomes pathological when it is excessive, persistent, or out of proportion to the actual situation. Disorders classified under anxiety disorders in the DSM-5 include separation anxiety, selective mutism, specific phobia, social anxiety disorder, panic disorder, agoraphobia, generalized anxiety disorder, substance medication induced anxiety, or anxiety disorder due to another medical condition. On a national level, about 16% of adolescents from the ages of 12 to 17 have a diagnosed anxiety disorder. Girls stand at about 20% and are more likely than boys that stand at about 12%. The racial and ethnic differences are as such. Non-Hispanic white youth report higher diagnosed anxiety rates than Black or Hispanic, while they stand at 9%, Blacks at 5%, and Hispanics at 6%. By the LGBTQ plus status, the 2023 YRBS, which is the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, notes that there has been significantly higher rates of anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideations. The trend following is that there has been a 61% rise in diagnosed anxiety between 2016 and 2023, while reported distress has risen to 40% of high school students reported persistent sadness or helplessness. So, before we get into the long-term goals and short-term goals and interventions about anxiety, let's just talk a little bit about the experiences that I've seen and heard from about anxiety. A little bit of background about me without giving too much information. I work with teenagers every single day. I hear their stories. I hear their feelings, their thoughts, their emotions. And something I hear on the daily basis is that they're dealing with anxiety and depression. Anxiety and depression. Anxiety and depression. No matter what else is going on in their life, whether it be school problems, family problems, relationship problems, friends, you can name a list of things, but the common denominator is usually that they're fighting anxiety and depression. Why do you think that is? There's a number of reasons. There's a number of opinions that people have. It's easy to kind of push it onto social media and push it on things like parenting and like the school system and like COVID and all these different things. But in reality, it is likely a mixture of all of those things. The most I see is about school, about friendships, about family. And I would say, although they may not notice it themselves, a big part of that is social media and the expectations that they feel like they have on the pressure or an expectations that they feel like they have against them. And, I think a lot of it is overwhelming. I think a lot of them don't know how to express themselves, as kids normally do not. They do not know how to reach out. They do not know how to communicate. Thus, they come to talking to me without exposing too much information, talking to people like myself about what's going on in their lives. And like I stated earlier, a lot of it is anxiety and depression. But we are talking about anxiety today. So let's hop into the long-term goals, short-term goals, and interventions for anxiety. So with that being said, let's get into the long-term goals. The first long-term goal that is probably the most prevalent and recognizable would be developing healthy coping mechanisms. Um, you want the client to identify things that consistently help. There are resources all over the internet filled with hundreds of coping skills, like exercising, yoga, doing puzzles, watching TV, listening to music, talking to friends, doing chores, literally quite literally anything that isn't harmful or illegal can be a coping mechanism. So identifying what those are and what works for the client or you or someone you know it would probably be the most important long-term goal. Um, Short-term goals following it would be identifying triggers that lead to anxiety, whether they be social, academic, or family related. Learning and practicing these coping skills at least 3 times, um, I guess a week, or however often you feel like you need to practice them. I guess it would be based on how many times you experience anxiety, and track the anxiety episodes and the coping responses that work weekly. Long-term goal number 2, reduce overall anxiety severity and frequency. The goal is to stop having anxiety attacks completely. But is that going to change from having four anxiety attacks a week to having none? Absolutely not. So, I mean, not all at once. So the goal is to lessen the frequency of those and severity of those anxiety attacks. If you have 3 anxiety attacks a week that last about an hour each time, the following week you start treatment is not going to turn it into 1 anxiety a week that lasts 10 minutes. It's just not going to happen. But you can work on those things by paying attention to how long they last, how bad they are, and again, going back to long-term goal number 1, understanding what helps you most and tracking how you respond to those coping skills. And hopefully you can start to measure and see the difference between your anxiety attacks then versus after you started treatment. Now, on to this next long-term goal, which may be one of the more difficult ones, improve emotional regulation and resilience. The short-term goals behind this will be identifying situations that trigger strong emotional reactions, learn to use emotional regulation strategies like pausing, naming the feeling, or self-soothing, and reflect on emotional responses weekly in therapy. Now, we can all understand how hard it might be to regulate your emotions and build resilience to your environment, because we all have different things going on. We all understand that life happens, school happens, families happen, friends happen. Life is never going to stop lifing for anyone, and that's understandable. But in order to tackle anxiety, we must tackle how we respond to things, how we react to things that we hear, that we see, and figure out how to emotionally regulate. That's a part of growing up. Being able to control how you respond, what emotions that you show, what emotions you respond with. And I think in a matter of doing that, you will find yourself having less anxiety, because if you think more about the emotion and what you're dealing with and how you're seeing it, how you're reacting to it, if you give yourself time to think and time to process, anxiety may not be as prevalent as it would be before. Now, this one is my favorite. Long-term goal number 4, strengthen cognitive flexibility and self-efficacy. Short-term goals, identify 3 to 5 common negative or irrational thoughts. Practice thought challenging and positive self-talk daily and report improved confidence in managing anxiety-provoking situations. I will tell you this, while I've been in my internship, a lot of my clients remain nameless, but my clients deal with a lot of anxiety, and a lot of those thoughts are completely irrational. They're worried about things that have never happened before, that they've never seen before, that they've only heard of on social media, things that they've heard friends go through, or things that they've never experienced. Does that make sense? In a way, yes. Everyone's feelings are valid, but anxiety is the fear of somewhat the unknown, things that could happen and that aren't happening. That's like being afraid that a spider might be in your room instead of being afraid of the spider that's in front of you. Challenging your thoughts. This is kind of what this long-term goal is, challenging those irrational thoughts and trying to make sense of them, because once you make sense of them, you probably won't have much anxiety behind it anymore. Because like I said, with the spider in front of me might be scary, but a spider that might be in the room isn't so scary, right? This next long-term goal is also one of my favorites, building supportive relationships and communication skills. Your short-term goal would be to identify at least 2 trusted people to reach out to for support, practice assertive communication skills in sessions, and report improved comfort in expressing needs or asking for help. This is kind of one of those things that have to do with safety assessments. Safety planning, they normally follow a lot of these things where you have people that you can reach out to, that you trust and that are supportive and that are reliable enough to where you can count on them in certain circumstances that may not be as convenient for them, or because anxiety attacks can happen at any time. Inconvenience will happen. So just be mindful of that, to have people that don't mind being inconvenienced, even though they probably aren't going to look at it as an inconvenience. At least hopefully they wouldn't. But building supportive relationships and communication skills. Communication is key to everything, to personal relationships, to business relationships, to your growth, your health, and communicating your boundaries, communicating your needs, your expectations. All the above are very important. So it's imperative that you communicate during sessions to effectively express how you feel, what you've been going through, the emotions you're experiencing, the thoughts that you're experiencing, so the anxiety that you're feeling can be addressed thoroughly. And lastly, we have maintain long-term recovery and relapse prevention. Your short-term goals here would be create a relapse prevention plan. Like I said before, like a safety plan filled with coping skills, supports, contacts, and early warning signs. That is exactly what a safety plan is for. I use them at work every single day. They're helpful, they're informative, and honestly, anyone who struggles with something that is debilitating like anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, self-harm thoughts should use a safety plan. Review progress monthly with a therapist. If you're going through these things, I highly recommend that you talk to your therapist about them if you haven't already. And once you get on this track of progression, talk to them monthly or really as often as possible about the progress of your anxiety, and identify and plan for upcoming stressors, exams, family issues, transitions. Life is not going to stop lifing just because you have plans for your anxiety. School is going to happen. Relationships are going to happen. Life is going to happen. I'm sure nobody expected COVID to be as big as it was, but it happened. And we are currently feeling the effects of it. Kids are feeling the effects of it, but that's okay. you can identify and prepare for those things. Again, jumping back to the safety plan. So I feel like preparation is also key when dealing with anxiety. Let's talk about interventions. For interventions, a lot of them are repetitive, so I won't go over them again and again. But like we were talking about before, interventions can be really anything from cognitive behavioral therapy to doing homework and writing in your journal, relaxation training, exposure therapy, coping cards, family sessions. That's one that people don't normally do a lot. Cognitive restructuring, behavioral experiments, social skills training. Interventions are made to further along your short-term goals, so then your short-term goals can push further your long-term goals. So your interventions are going to be key to pressing on through your progression as they are detailed in your short-term goals, like their steps. If your short-term goals are stepping stones to your long-term goals, your interventions are stepping stones to your interventions. So that's how they should really be looked at. You can look at really anything you do in therapy as an intervention. Like I said, family sessions, peer support, a lot of different kinds of therapy, different coping skills, anything to further along your progress with your short-term goals. Now, where does the clinician fit in this? How do you intervene with a culturally competent approach? With anxiety, you can go about it a lot of ways, especially me and myself being a Black man. That already kind of comes, I would like to say it already comes with a sense of cultural competency. However, the approaches to anxiety could be respect to cultural identity and worldview. So understanding your client, understanding yourself, where you're coming from, where they're coming from. A lot of cultures work differently. In the Black culture, we're just starting to really understand mental health, anxiety, and depression. So understanding where somebody's parents might be coming from, where they might be coming from, and how those two perspectives may be different. Recognizing the stigma and systemic barriers. Like I was saying, with the Black community, there's somewhat of a stigma on mental health right now, just because of the lack of awareness and understanding. Excuse me. And that's okay. Everyone's learning, everyone's growing. But again, understanding where each other are is important in understanding the anxiety and where that's coming from and how to help. Integrating traditional and evidence-based methods. Let's go with traditional and evidence-based methods. Okay, so to further the point on cultural competent approaches to anxiety, I'm a firm believer in family-centered approaches. I think that family sessions are one of the greatest ideas. I think progress starts in the home. I think if everyone is involved in someone's well-being, then they have no choice but to get better. I think things like storytelling, family sessions, family time, being able to talk to your parents or your guardians or your siblings or whomever you trust is super important. Being able to express yourself, having them help you with your coping skills, with your moments, having those people in your safety plans, especially, it takes away a lot of worry, especially when you are honest and truthful about what you're going through. Your parents probably have gone through it. Your sister, your brother, your aunts, your uncles, or whomever may have also gone through whatever you're dealing with. So they know that it's okay, and they can reinforce you, encourage you, and empower you to get through. And lastly, let's talk about promoting resilience and empowerment. You can promote resilience by just focusing on the positives, focusing on what you can control and how you can get, and controlling how you react. Just because things are going bad doesn't mean things are always going to be bad. Just because things are hard doesn't mean things are always going to be hard for you. Life is going to life. Like we talked about this entire time, life is going to life. Things are going to happen. School is going to school. Family is going to family. Friends are going to friend. And that's okay. You can make it through. You can do whatever it is you feel like you want to do. Your anxiety is not who you are. And I think that is the most important thing when dealing with anxiety and depression. A lot of people let it consume them and make it their whole identity, which in turn makes things worse. You also hold power in the tongue by saying, I have anxiety, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have depression. You kind of put a latch on yourself. You kind of put a hold on yourself with those words because you may not even be diagnosed. A lot of people that I've spoken to, they say they have anxiety but aren't diagnosed. They say they have depression but aren't depressed. You can be anxious for a moment without having diagnosed anxiety. You can be depressed for a moment without having diagnosed depression. And that's okay. I feel like I said, a lot of people place that label of anxiety on themselves and kind of roll with it instead of creating a shield of resilience and empowerment. They kind of just lean into the anxiety and it becomes more of a, well, I have anxiety, so that's why this is happening, or that's why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. But you can take hold of that. You can control that. You can work and use these short-term goals and long-term goals and interventions to work through that anxiety and come out a better person, feeling better about yourself and better about your position in the world. I hope this was helpful. Thank you. Peace.